Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon on a brisk fall evening in Cedar Valley. The vibrant oranges and purples of the sunset cast an ethereal glow over the quiet streets, a stark contrast to the eerie events that would soon unfold. Families were gathering for dinners, children playing tag in the dusky light, unaware that darkness would soon envelop their town in more ways than one. In a nondescript home on Maple Street, 34-year-old Elise Morrison sat cross-legged on her living room floor, flipping through old photographs. Each click of the camera captured moments now frozen in time. Her wedding day, birthdays, and cherished travels. The cherubic smiles reflected back at her felt like a warm embrace, a solace from the reality she was facing. Since her husband Mark had been deployed 6 months earlier, the house had grown quieter, the wall slowly closing in with each passing day of solitude. As Elise turned to a particularly whimsical shot of her husband dressed as a pirate for Halloween, she was startled by a knock at the door. It was 7:15 p.m., and the evening's pallor deepened. Gripping the photo in her hand, Elise felt a flutter of anxiety. Him again, heavier this time, almost urgent. She rose and approached the door, uncertainty twisting in her stomach. The moment she opened it, she was met by the grim faces of 2 uniformed officers. Their hats were pulled low, and their eyes were shadowed by the dim porch light, revealing nothing of the intentions behind their visit. Instinctively, her heart raced as a chill crept up his spine. She sensed life in Cedar Valley was about to deviate into something unrecognizable. "Is this the Morrison residence?" one of the officers asked, his tone formal, yet unusually soft. Without clarifying further, he stepped forward, words tumbling awkwardly from his lips, a harbinger of unfathomable news. "Mia!" The victim. Elise felt her breath catch as the officer continued. "I'm Officer Collins, and this is Officer Martinez. We need to speak with you about your husband, Mark." The dread curling in her stomach tightened, her instinct clawing at her to retreat, to deny this encounter before it began. "Is he okay?" she managed to ask, her voice cracking like ice under pressure. The silence that followed was louder than any words, resonating in the cold air like a funeral bell. Elise glanced toward the street, her heart pounding like a war drum, picturing Mark in his camouflage, brave and steadfast. The image of him laughing over a barbecue filled her mind. How could anything be wrong? "Ma'am, please sit down," Officer Collins instructed gently, motioning towards the living room. Elise's world shifted beneath her. She complied, forcing her legs to move while her mind raced with possibility an accident, perhaps? A minor injury? Being stationed overseas could be perilous. As she sat on the couch, the officers followed suit, making sure to maintain a respectful distance. Officer Collins leaned forward slightly, the gravity of the moment weighing heavy on his shoulders. "You need to know, there has been an incident at the base." She didn't have to hear any more. The way he struggled for words told her all she needed to know. Her husband was dead. Mark was gone, and with him, the promises of tomorrow. The officers exchanged glances, a silent communication of pity and understanding as Elise's mind reeled. It was then that the world darkened, the colors fading from the walls of the living room like paint washed away by a storm. "What happened?" she whispered, the question barely rising above the chill enveloping her. "We're still investigating." But Officer Martinez began. His warm brown eyes were clouded with sympathy. "There was an ambush during a routine patrol. We can provide you with all the details, but we want to ensure you have support. Is there someone we can call?" Elise's heart shattered like glass, fragments cutting into her as the weight of the truth settled in her bone. The crime scene. The cold wind howled through the streets of Cedar Valley, whipping at the leaves and sending a shiver down Elise's spine as she sat in the somber haze of grief. Word of Mark's death had spread until the town found itself draped in collective sorrow. Friends, neighbors, and family filtered in and out of her home, but Elise felt detached, as if she were trapped in a glass bubble, able to see and hear, yet unable to participate in the world around. 3 days after the officer's grim visit, the investigative team arrived to probe the incident further. Elise accompanied them on an unplanned trip back to the Basia-chilling visit that would haunt her thoughts long after it was over. The air grew heavy as they approached the tightly guarded grounds of the military installation, a labyrinth of barbed wire and concrete, transformed by the stark reality of her husband's fate. The scene was cordoned off, a stark contrast to her previous memories of family gatherings and laughter in the sunlight. Now, the former sense of security felt hollow as the investigative team, dressed in military fatigue, examined their surroundings with relentless focus. Mark had been a part of a convoy that fell under a surprise attack while nearing an unfamiliar village. As they entered the area marked off for evidence, Elise's heart sank at the thought of her husband in that unforgiving terrain. The ground was scarred, and remnants of the ambush were scattered in tragic disarray. Metal from a ruined vehicle glinted in the sunlight, and faint traces of blood, now dry and brown, served as a haunting reminder of the chaos that had erupted mere days ago. "And you walk us through the moments you remember him talking about his missions?" one investigator asked, glancing at Elise. His tone was patient, but his eyes darted back to the scene, wheels turning in a quest for answers. "Anything you can provide might help us piece together why this happened." With an aching heart, she nodded, recalling Mark's passion for his work, how he spoke of courage and duty, tales of friendships formed in enemy territory. She felt his absence more profoundly than ever, as if he were a shadow following her, whispering in her ear about the nights they shared and the dreams they spun together. But beneath her sorrow lay confusion, a flickering ember of doubt, as the investigators sifted through the remnants of shattered vehicles and spent ammunition. She couldn't shake the notion that something more sinister lurked beneath the surface. The scalding suspicion nagged at her. Was it really just an ambush, or was there a deeper mystery woven into the chaos of war? The early investigation. Back in Cedar Valley, the aftermath of Mark's death rippled through the community. Memories of his laughter, interwoven with the palpable grief that intensified with each shared glance. The investigative team had returned to base, but questions lingered in the air like smoke from extinguished fireworks. Elise was left grappling with the unrelenting ache in her chest and the shadows of doubt that insidiously crept in. 3 days later, she found herself sitting across from Detective Rachel Sinclair in the small, crowded precinct, the air thick with the scent of strong coffee and faded paperwork. Detective Sinclair wasn't new to the world of military investigations. and her quick, perceptive nature instantly put Elise at ease, if only slight. "Thank you for coming in, Elise," Sinclair said, folding her hands and leaning forward, her expression earnest. "I know this is an incredibly difficult time for you. I'm here to get to the bottom of what happened to your husband." For the first time since the knock on her door, Elise felt a flicker of hope. "I need to understand, how did this happen? Was it an ambush? Or could it have been planned?" Detective Sinclair nodded, her brows knitting together slightly. "That's exactly what we're trying to determine. Just to be clear, we are standing at the beginning of this investigation. The preliminary reports indicate it was indeed an ambush. But we know that no detail in these situations is too small." Elise exhaled, her heart racing at the thought of the twisted complexities that might unravel. Sinclair continued. "We conducted interviews with survivors of the convoy. Some of them reported seeing a suspicious vehicle tailing them before the attack. We believe it's essential to identify if this was mere coincidence or part of a deliberate plan." As Elise absorbed the information, her mind wandered to her last conversation with Mark. He had spoken of increasing tensions in recent weeks, whispers of factions forming and reforming in unseen corners of the region. What had he known that he hadn't told her? What had he known? "Do you suspect anyone?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly as the weight of her own words sank in. Sinclair hesitated before responding. "Speculation at this point could muddy the waters, but we're exploring every angle. I'd recommend that you try to remember any details he may have mentioned about his unit, or his patrols. The more context we can gather, the clearer the picture will become." The detective's words settled deep within her, igniting a quiet determination born from love but mixed with despair. Elise felt an indefinable pull to uncover the truth, as though Mark was guiding her. With each secret unveiled, perhaps she would reclaim not only him but also the future they had envisioned together. The dead ends. Days turned into weeks, and the leaves had fallen from the trees, leaving Cedar Valley enveloped in a blanket of gray. With each passing moment, Elise wrestled with the horror of her new reality. Her routine had shifted into a spiral of waiting and searching, the dark clouds of uncertainty hanging heavily over her. Elise was sitting at her kitchen table one rainy afternoon, a mound of papers strewn before her: news articles, military briefings, and a notebook filled with notes she had scrawled from conversations with Detective Sinclair. Most days it felt like she was gripped by shadows. The corners of her mind echoed with acrimony, longing for answers that were impossible to find. "You still have that contact Mark once mentioned?" Sinclair had asked a week ago. "His friend from the unit? The one with the suspicious stories?" Elise nodded, memories flooding back of Mark's camaraderie with Lieutenant Jason Keene, a man who often spun tales that bordered on the unbelievable ghost stories of mishaps during training, things that sounded too outrageous to be real. But Elise had never met him. The trauma of loss distorted their lives, the shadows of husband and friend colliding in her thoughts. Attempting to follow every thread, Elise reached out to Keene, but it led to sparse conversations about their fallen brothers, in errands, and profound silence, where clarity should have been. His struggle to articulate the circumstances surrounding the attack left her feeling more isolated, hearing dread in his voice every time he spoke of the mission. "We were just following orders. It was supposed to be routine." Each time Jason recounted the encounter, his tone trembled with confusion and fear, as if he were reliving something that shouldn't exist. The more she probed, The murkier the details became, Jason confessed that something felt amiss, but was vague an unnamed presence that had haunted them for days leading up to the attack, a tension he couldn't shake off. By the time she hung up the phone, Elise felt like the weight of the world crushed down on her. Every lead became a dead end. Her heart ached for clarity, but found only shadows' voices twisting in the corridors of her mind. There was a desperation rising in her. With each unanswered question, she felt she was losing Mark all over again. There has to be more, she whispered to herself, frustration mingling with quiet resolve. If she was to unearth the truth of what had transpired, she would have to dig deeper. But she needed help, someone who could illuminate the murk of her investigation before it swallowed her whole. Would anyone dare shine a light into the darkness? Or was she destined to wander this labyrinth alone? A break in the case. Just when Elise felt she had exhausted every lead and painted herself into a corner of despair, an unexpected break appeared, casting a glimmer of light onto her shadowy world. It was a bleak Tuesday afternoon, and the November chill seeped through her windows like a specter. Despite her relentless pursuit, nothing had come to fruition. She sat at her cluttered kitchen table, now an altar to her quest for truth, when her phone rang unexpectedly. "Oh," she answered, her heart quickening with hesitation. "Elise, it's Detective Sinclair. I have something you need to hear." The determined voice on the other end sent shivers down her spine. Her pulse raced as she straightened in a chair. "What is it?" "We've obtained new information regarding the convoy ambush. One of the survivors, Sergeant Cole McKinney, is willing to talk. He mentioned seeing a civilian vehicle near the site, one he believed was part of a larger network." Elise felt her breath hitch. Hope stirred within her like a seed breaking through soil. "How soon can I meet with him?" "Let's arrange a time for tomorrow," Sinclair replied, her professional warmth underlying the urgency of the situation. "He's willing to provide a witness statement, but stresses the need for discretion." The following day couldn't arrive fast enough. Elise paced her living room, her anxiety coiling tightly inside her as the clock crept forward. Sinister questions danced in her mind. What if he didn't remember anything? What if the news was bad rather than good? When the time finally arrived, Elise arrived at the precinct, her heart hammering against her ribcage. She was ushered into an empty conference room, its bare walls rendering it cold and impersonal. Moments later, Sergeant McKinney walked in, a slight man with weary eyes and a stubble-covered jaw, a facade of stoic resolve masking the turmoil within. "Thanks for meeting with me," Elise said, almost inaudibly, as she took her seat. "Thank you for being here," he murmured, his voice low and thick with emotion. His wife. Yes. A lump lodged in her throat. "I need to know what happened to Mark." Sergeant McKinney hesitated for a moment, a storm brewing behind his daze. They were after something more than a routine patrol. "There was chatter we didn't pick up on, rumors of weapons caches and fighters congregating. We were sent in blind." The room spiraled into silence, the words hanging heavy in the air. His eyes darted away, guilt etched into his features. The civilian vehicle, however, was in it. They weren't friendly. Elise's heart sank. This was the break she had hoped for, but it unearthed a deeper layer of dread. "What do you mean?" McKinney leaned forward, the tension around his shoulders coiling tightly. I saw a man standing there watching us. He was too close for comfort. He wasn't just the enemy we had to worry about. There was someone else pulling strings. Her breath caught in her throat. Did they know more than they'd revealed, or was Mark simply a pawn in something larger? Each revelation led her deeper into a web of danger and intrigue. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was edging closer to the truth. Hadia, with newfound determination, she prepared to follow this lead wherever it might lead, compelled to shine light into the dark corners of her husband's last mission. A suspect? The conversation with Sergeant McKinney had shifted something within Elysian urgency. Ignited as she grasped the broader implications of Mark's death. The name of the man watching from the shadows hung in the air, unspoken yet palpable, a ghost waiting to be addressed. Each word from the sergeant had forced her to confront a reality where her husband's fate entwined not only with enemy combatants, but also with individuals lurking in the gray area of allegiance and betrayal. Days stretched in agonizing anticipation as the investigation pressed forward. New leads sought and pursued. Detective Sinclair worked tirelessly alongside her team, entwining the threads of McKinney's testimony with every bit of evidence they had gathered. It wasn't until a chilly Friday afternoon that Sinclair called Elise with the breakthrough she had been waiting for. We haven't named the one McKinney mentioned. His name is Aiden Russo, and he's a known operative in the area, she said, the gravity of the situation evident in her tone. Aiden Russo, Elise whispered, letting the name linger in her throat. What do we know about him? He's been tied to several clandestine operations, and it appears he has a network of connections back home as well. We're coordinating with military intelligence to track his movement. There's more, though. We might have reason to believe he's back in Cedar Valley. The thought sent shivers through her as the walls of her home closed in. Back in Cedar Valley, the familiarity of her town suddenly felt like a trap. But why? What could he possibly want here? Elise could hardly wrap her mind around the implications. We need to find out if he has connections that go beyond the battlefield. You could be in danger, Sinclair cautioned. The protective edge in her voice reminded Elise that this was more than just a search for truth. It was a defense mechanism to safeguard her life. Determined to uncover what lay beneath the surface, Elise started digging online, hoping to find visual clues that might lead her closer to the man who had seemingly overshadowed her life. She spent hours scrolling through social media, checking local forums, anything that might reveal an encounter or a mention of Russo. It wasn't long before she unearthed a distorted webcam video of a bar fight at the Rusty Anchor, a local pub known for attracting an eclectic crowd. Squinting at the screen, Elise recognized the roguish figure who seemed to command attention. His intense gaze bore a chilling familiarity, a face she had seen in photographs from Mark's unit. This is him, she muttered, heart racing as she noted how easily he navigated chaos, blending anger and charm effortlessly. Was he the same man who harbored resentment toward her husband? Drawing in a shaky breath, she knew she had to act. With Sinclair's assistance, they decided to set up a discreet surveillance at the bar. As darkness enveloped the valley, Elise felt a mixture of resolve and anxiety. She was venturing into an unknown realm where danger whispered from the ship. In that dimly lit bar, cloaked figures sought solace or refuge from pain. But Elise was no longer just a bystander. She had slipped into the fabric of a narrative unraveling before her eyes, a domestic tragedy that intersected with something much larger. Would she have the strength to confront the specter of Aiden Russo and discover the truth behind her husband's untimely death? The trial. Months passed, and the air had shifted in Cedar Valley, filled with whispers of anticipation and dread. The days rolled into a blur of grief and uncertainty. But as the trial of Aiden Russo approached, Elise found herself caught in a swell of emotions more volatile than the autumn wind outside her window. The courtroom stood as a stark reminder of a life altered forever, the walls heavy with the weight of truth, deception, and the search for accountability. Elise wore a fitted black dress, simple yet dignified, her hair drawn back tightly. But she wanted to project strength. She wanted to stand resolute in the face of the man she held responsible for Mark's death. As she entered the courtroom, memory swelled Mark's laughter, their dreams, and all the stolen moments they would never share. In the front row, loved ones gathered, a support system encased in grief, each face etched with the shared loss. Elise felt their gaze on her, a comforting reminder that they too were fighting for justice. Aiden Russo sat at the defendant's table, his disheveled hair and defiant posture projecting an aura of arrogance. He leaned back, his eyes cool and calculating, casting an uncaring glance toward Elise that sent a wave of nausea through her. She clenched her fists, resolve solidifying within her. She would not cower. The prosecutor began laying out the evidence with meticulous precision, weaving a grim tapestry of events, leading to the ambush, a blend of testimonies, photographs, and surveillance footage from the rusty anchor. Each image hung in the air, a stark reminder of Mark's sacrifice, a sharp reminder of the shadow Russo had cast over their lives. Elise held her breath as Sergeant McKinney took the stand, recounting the fateful day with a clear, unwavering. Each word he spoke echoed through the courtroom, invoking the specter of that dire, chaotic ambush rooted in rumorous and rising tension. When McKinney bravely uttered that he had spotted a civilian vehicle linked to Russo in the days leading up to the attack, Elise felt a shiver of satisfaction run through her. They might finally expose the monster who had haunted their lives. Then came the defense attorney, a smooth-talking opponent who wielded his words like daggers, seeking to dismantle every piece of evidence. He painted Russo as a scapegoat, a man wronged by unsubstantiated allegations. Each time he attempted to redirect blame elsewhere, Elise felt her anger kindle. After hours of arguments and counterpoints, the courtroom was gripped in tense silence as Elise took the stand. Her heart hammered, the weight of the moment billowing within her. She was determined to reclaim Mark's voice, to breathe life into the memories they had crafted together. "I want the court to understand who my husband was," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil brewing inside. "He was a loving man, dedicated not only to his country but to his family. What was taken from us that day was more than a soldier. It was a future." The defense attorney pounced on her vulnerability, attempting to undermine her testimony with doubt. "Isn't it possible that your husband's death was a tragic consequence of war, rather than anything premeditated?" Tears pricked at the corners of Elise's eyes, but she held her ground. "No. There was intent. There were warnings up." The trial continued, weaving through the intricacies of testimony and evidence, creeping toward a bittersweet climax. As the jury deliberated, the air grew thicker, an electric tension mashing hope with fear. In that liminal space, Elise felt Mark's spirit beside her, urging her to hold on, to seek the truth, to demand justice. After what felt like an eternity, the jury returned with their verdict. The judge, stern and unwavering, read it aloud. The trajectory of the courtroom seemed to pivot. Heavy breaths caught in throats as they awaited resolution. When Aidan Russo was found guilty of conspiracy and accountability for his role in the ambush, a wave of relief swept through the room. Elise's tears flowed freely. This time, a cathartic release of anguish mixed with the bittersweet taste of justice. At last, a flicker of peace ignited in her heart. The path ahead would still be fraught with challenge. Yet she had begun to uncover her own strength, rooted in love, resilience, and the undeniable desire to honor a life cut short too soon. The aftermath. The courtroom faded into a solemn memory soon after the verdict was rendered, and the weight of the trial began to lift, replaced by a heavy silence that blanketed Cedar Valley. Elise took a long, lingering breath, each inhale filled with the bittersweet taste of justice, tempered by the bitter absence that would forever linger in her heart. In the weeks that followed, the governor held a press conference honoring the fallen soldiers of the ambush, detailing the steps the military would take to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Mark's picture was displayed prominently, a smiling visage that captured his spirit. They even presented Elise with a framed commendation for his bravery. She accepted it with trembling hands, the metal gleaming under the fluorescent lights, a reminder of all he had sacrificed. But as the community gathered to pay respects and celebrate their heroes, Elise couldn't shake the loneliness that enveloped her. Each sympathetic glance offered at town halls of grocery stores weighed heavy, a gentle reminder of what she had lost, a perpetual ache now tucked away in her heart. The chatter of friends and neighbors felt like echoes in an empty room, a hollow solace that failed to fill the void. Days turned into weeks again, and her world was still and quiet, a world where laughter was absent. Slowly, she began to reclaim fragments of herself, taking solace in small tasks: gardening, crafting, even visiting the coffee shop where Mark often surprised her with steaming latte. With each mundane encounter, she tapped into a deeper resolve. Life was irrevocably changed, but there was much yet to live for. Elise attended support groups for military families, where shared sorrow transformed into unexpected bonds. She discovered camaraderie among those who had lost loved ones in the same shadowy battles. Stories poured out, each tale a thread woven into a tapestry of resilience. They found strength in one another, mapping lifelines that gave new context to their grief. In the quiet moments of reflection, she started documenting her journey, converting pain into words. It started as a series of letters addressed to Mark, filled with memories, dreams they had discussed, and the transformation that lay ahead. With each entry, her voice grew stronger, imbued with a new sense of purpose. She felt a tug to honor not only his memory, but also to enlighten others about the unseen struggles faced by military families and the effects of war. But the remnants of the past haunted her. Those nights when silence was deafening and uncertainty clawed at her spirit. Elizabeth learned to navigate them, to breathe through the depths of sorrow and envision a future that belonged to her, filled with hope, healing, and a new kind of love for herself, for those she had lost, and for the life she envisioned beyond. The pain. As seasons changed and the leaves began to turn again in Cedar Valley, Elise stood at the window, Watching the brilliant colors dance in the crisp breeze, she felt bittersweet without Mark by his side. But, with a heart full of resolve, she stepped outside, determined to plant a garden in Isanora Place, where growth and remembrance intertwined. A place for others to find healing amidst their own storms. With every seed sown, she whispered a promise into the air. He would forge ahead, honoring their love through the legacy of hope that blossomed in the face of despair, a journey that empowered her to bloom. Amid 1,000 broken pieces, the aftermath of loss could be beautiful, she realized, if she dared to embrace the light among the shadows. Reflection. As winter crept over Cedar Valley, covering the town in a soft blanket of white, Elise found herself wandering through a landscape coated in reflection. The first snowy day had arrived unexpectedly, each snowflake falling softly, yet congealing into a crystalline surface that mirrored the complexities of your heart. The world outside now felt as fractured yet beautiful as her spire-attacked flake unique, carrying untold stories, while chaos below continued to shape their very course. With the garden slowly taking form in her backyard, Elise began to appreciate the irony of nurturing new life in the aftermath of loss. Each garden bed she tended became a place for healing, a sanctuary that flourished as she embraced her grief. The act of planting and cultivating had evolved into a metaphor for her journey, teaching her that circumstances don't dictate one's growth. In quiet moments of solitude, she reflected on all that had transpired, the heartbreaking trial, the friendships forged in loss, and the tenacity that emerged from struggle. Stripped of illusions, she learned to embrace vulnerability, letting it guide her like a compass. Those letters she had penned to Mark found a new purpose, a manuscript of resilience. Each page was a testament to their love, a way of showing that while their story had been obscured by tragedy, it still glimmered with fragments of hope.